Hi, I'm Aldo. Welcome to Plays the Thing, the channel where I share my experiences prepping and playing tabletop role-playing games. This is the second video in the series that I'm calling A Tale of Two One-Shots. Specifically, it's the episode where I discuss WhiteHack, the role-playing game written by Christian Merstham, and discuss how my group and I used it to prep and play Mission Excalibur, which is an adventure written by Sean McConnelly and published by Nerd Glows On Games. The reason I chose WhiteHack for this game primarily has to do with the nature of Mission Excalibur, which is compatible with unspecified OSR fantasy rule sets, even though it's set in the 1940s in an alternate future where the Nazis won World War II. This approach means that the adventure includes characters like one Oberon Sims, who we are told fights and saves like a 4th level cleric, but is unable to cast spells. It also means that D&D monsters and magic items and full-blown spellcasters appear in the published adventure. So this approach suggests that players should be able to make your traditional D&D characters. Fighters and thieves and clerics and magic users and dwarves and elves and halflings and maybe other things as well. But the adventure doesn't give guidelines for how to make these characters. It doesn't suggest a specific rule system for doing this. And it also doesn't really tell you how to integrate such characters into the setting that it has prepared for play. It leaves all of that up to the game master, and I am totally happy with that. I decided that I didn't want to take the gonzo approach of having the players make D&D characters that get ported over into the Mission Excalibur setting. That's the reason why I opted for WhiteHack, because although WhiteHack is ostensibly designed to run old school adventures, it in no way mandates a fantasy setting of any sort. And character creation is extremely flexible and open and allows for the creation of lots of interesting concepts. There are just enough rules for creating modern and futuristic weapons and armor and vehicles that this seemed like a good match for my needs. With all of that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about how the system works. Characters have some very familiar attributes. Until the 4th edition of WhiteHack, which is what I'm using to run this game, it was a very familiar set of attributes: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. 4th edition changed a few of those. Dexterity became agility, constitution became toughness, and wisdom became will. Still pretty familiar. In addition to those attributes, characters have attack values, and these are tied to their class. Every class has a specific attack value, and that attack value raises at different rates as characters gain in level. And it's the same for a save value, which is like a saving throw, right, of old. Again, every class has their own save value, which also increases along with a character's level. And all of these stats are on a 3 to 18 range. So, task resolution. How does that work? Well, this is a little different. It is a roll under system. You roll 1d20, you compare it to the attribute or the attack value or the save value, and if you match or roll below that, you've succeeded. Matching your value, so if you have a 14 in your attack value and you roll a 14, that is a crit. A 20 is definitely a failure, right? So that's the way the system works. What really makes the game sing in a lot of ways is the combination of classes and groups. Let me talk about classes first. The game has 3 character classes: the deft, the strong, and the wise. The book also includes 3 others: the brave, the clever, and the fortunate, but those are optional rules, and I had not familiarized myself with them, so I decided not to include them as options for this particular game, even though they probably would have been a pretty good match. Something important to note about classes: they are not like your traditional character classes in other D&D style games. They are not your character's occupation. Instead, it's more like a character type. It's a player game interface more than it is something to do with a character's profession. Another way of saying it is that the character class defines how the character solves problems in the game, regardless of their occupation, their background, their ancestry, or anything else. To understand it better, I think we need to talk about groups. All characters get 2 groups at first level, and they can allocate or specify that those groups pertain to any one of 3 things. One is a must, their vocation. The character will take a vocation, and that vocation is more like your standard or traditional D&D character class. So for instance, you can have your vocation be warrior or wizard or rogue or priest or anything else you can imagine. That is more like your class than your class in WhiteHack. Let me give you an example of how this might work. Your traditional Dungeons and Dragons wizard would be a wise by class in WhiteHack, but would be a wizard by vocation. However, you could have a strong wizard in WhiteHack, or you can have a deft wizard in WhiteHack. Strong wizards and deft wizards don't cast spells in the same way that wise wizards do, and so therefore they're going to feel very different than your traditional D&D wizard class. Nevertheless, they are still wizards and they can do wizardly things. What other options do you have when it comes to groups? Because remember, you get 2 groups to start. One of them has to go to your vocation, but then you have an option with the other group. You can either take a species group, and if you're going to take a species group, obviously you have to take it at first level at character creation. And that's how you get your dwarf or your elf or your halfling or your half-orc. If you don't take a species, you're assumed to be a member of the default species in the setting, which in most cases is going to be a human, although it doesn't necessarily have to be. The other option that you have, if you're not going to take a species, is to take an affiliation. Affiliations establish your character's contacts with organizations, and these organizations can be anything from guilds to schools to tribes or companies to secret societies to cults or to other social structures. These social structures can also be associated with kind of cosmic forces. So for example, you can have an affiliation with chaos or with law or with evil or with good. When you read the game, it tells you what you get out of these affiliations. Typically, when you pick a group, you associate that group with an attribute. So a strong wizard might associate their wizard vocation group with intelligence. If they did that, the strong wizard would have the equivalent of 5th edition advantage. In this game, it's called double positive rolls when using intelligence to accomplish anything wizardly. So there's much more to say about WhiteHack, but this is all you need to understand how we made characters and how we prep for Mission Excalibur. So let's go ahead and jump into that prep. Before making characters, before approaching my players about doing Mission Excalibur, I did a little work on my own and made some decisions based on that work. The first thing I did is read Mission Excalibur. And the first thing I decided to do was that I had to be absolutely upfront with my group about what the mission was going to be. It's the 1940s. Hitler won. You're in England, where many survived by deferring to the Nazi occupiers. However, you are part of the resistance. You've just heard that the Nazis have unearthed Excalibur. It's time for you to recover it and unlock its secrets before they do. So that's what I texted them. A lot of you out there might be saying like, well, duh, that's what you need to do. I thought it was worth mentioning, being upfront about the premise, because I've been in a lot of games where that's not the case. I might have GM'd a lot of games where that's not the case. The GM, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else, says, ooh, this is a cool premise, but I want the reveal when we start playing. I want to have them gather and then have them receive the mission and go, oh, gasp, that's what we're doing. A lot of times when that happens, you're like, okay, guys, we're going to be playing in an alternate future World War II setting. Go ahead and make characters. You can make whatever you want. And then when you pull out the setting and you start playing, like the characters suddenly don't match what the mission's all about. And so they kind of feel that like they don't matter. It could be any character could just plug into the situation and it would be the same. In order to avoid that, I wanted to be very clear about what the mission was. The second thing I had to decide was what I wanted to do about magic and demi-humans, because like I said, this material appears in the published module. The question I had to decide is like, how much of this is going to be player facing? Are we going to make dwarves and elves as player characters? Are we going to have wizards as player characters? I guess in my mind, the default was going to be something like Indiana Jones. I mean, in Indiana Jones movies, you have the supernatural, it's real, it's there, it's the focus of quests, but the people involved in those quests are quote unquote regular human beings. They don't have magic and that sort of thing. That's kind of like what I had in my mind, but I didn't really care one way or the other whether it was a little more fantastic than that. I basically turned it over to my players and said, listen, in terms of like demi-humans, just think that we are in a post-World War II setting. If you can imagine a world where some demi-humans exist, then by all means, go ahead and make characters in that way. And same with wizards and things like that. Like, I will leave it up to you. I will trust you to flavor that in a way that makes sense for us. Finally, I had to decide what level to make these characters. And flipping through the book, reading Mission Excalibur, I saw that you had, your standard Nazi soldier was like a 3rd level fighter. Your stormtroopers were like 4th level fighters. You had 6th level characters, even some 11th level entities in the game. If I was going to go with those levels, I would have to up the PC level just for them to have a fighting chance. And so I decided with 3rd level WhiteHack characters. But in retrospect, I think it would have been better to have them make 1st level characters and just halved the levels of everything in the adventure. So your 11th level entities would become 6th level entities, your 3rd level Nazi soldiers would become 1-hit die creatures, and so on and so forth. I think that would have ultimately felt better, but it worked fine the way we had it. Armed with that information, my players made 3 characters on the first night, but this video has gone on longer than I thought it would, so I'm going to pause there and I'll share what characters they made in a follow-up video. As always, I wish you good health. I wish you good cheer. I wish you good gaming. Goodbye.